The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Valdoria Palace as Princess Isabella prepared for what should have been the happiest day of her young life. Today marked her 8th birthday, and the entire kingdom buzzed with excitement for the grand celebration planned in her honor. The princess stood before her ornate mirror while her governess, Miss Adelaide, carefully brushed her long auburn hair that caught the light like spun copper. "Your Highness looks absolutely radiant today," Miss Adelaide said with genuine warmth, securing a delicate diamond tiara upon Isabella's head. The tiara had belonged to her late mother, Queen Eleanor, who had passed away when Isabella was just 3 years old. The princess touched the sparkling jewels gently, feeling a connection to the mother she barely remembered but missed terribly. King Alexander entered the chamber with his usual commanding presence, though his eyes softened immediately upon seeing his daughter. At 42, he remained a handsome man with dark hair touched by silver at the temples and kind brown eyes that mirrored his daughter's. Behind him followed Queen Vivian, his second wife of 3 years, whose striking beauty was matched only by her ambitious nature. "My darling Isabella," King Alexander said, kneeling to his daughter's level and taking her small hands in his larger ones. "Are you ready for your special day? The entire kingdom has come to celebrate with you." Isabella nodded enthusiastically, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Father, will there really be a circus and magicians and dancing bears like you promised?" "Everything and more, my little princess," he assured her, kissing her forehead tenderly. "This day is all about you." Queen Vivian stepped forward, her silk gown rustling softly. Though beautiful with her platinum blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, there was something cold in her smile as she looked at Isabella. "Yes, darling, it will be quite the spectacle. The whole kingdom will see what a special little princess you are." Sir Marcus Blackwood, the captain of the Royal Guard, appeared in the doorway and bowed respectfully. At 35, he was known throughout Valdoria for his unwavering loyalty and exceptional skills as both a warrior and protector. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, and his uniform bore the golden eagle crest of the royal family. Most importantly, he had sworn a sacred oath to protect Princess Isabella with his life. "Your Majesty," Sir Marcus addressed the king, "the guests have begun arriving for the celebration. The Duke of Westmarch and his family, the Earl of Riverside, and several foreign dignitaries are already in the Great Hall." "Excellent," King Alexander replied, standing and straightening his formal jacket. "Marcus, I trust the security arrangements are all in place?" "Yes, Your Majesty. I have personally inspected every entrance and stationed my most trusted men throughout the palace and gardens. The princess will be completely safe during the festivities." What Sir Marcus didn't mention was the strange uneasiness he had felt all morning. As a seasoned soldier, he had learned to trust his instincts, and something felt different today. He couldn't pinpoint exactly what troubled him, but years of protecting the royal family had taught him to remain vigilant even during celebrations. The family made their way through the grand corridors of the palace, their footsteps echoing off the high ceilings adorned with painted angels and golden moldings. Valdoria Palace had been the seat of power for over 3 centuries, and its walls held countless secrets and stories. Today, it would host the most elaborate birthday celebration the kingdom had seen in years. As they approached the Great Hall, the sounds of laughter, music, and conversation grew louder. The massive oak doors were thrown open to reveal a magnificent sight. The hall had been transformed into a wonderland fit for a princess. Thousands of white roses and baby's breath created elegant arrangements throughout the room, while golden ribbons and silk banners bearing Isabella's initials hung from every pillar and archway. The guest list read like a who's who of European nobility. Princes and princesses from neighboring kingdoms, wealthy merchants, high-ranking military officers, and distinguished diplomats all mingled together in their finest attire. A string quartet played classical melodies from a raised platform while servants in crisp uniforms circulated with silver trays of delicacies and sparkling cider. "Oh, father, it's even more beautiful than I imagined," Isabella exclaimed, her hands clasped together in delight as she took in the splendor of the decorated hall. King Alexander smiled proudly. "Nothing is too grand for my precious daughter. Come, let us greet our guests." As the royal family entered the hall, a hush fell over the crowd before erupting into enthusiastic applause. "Long live Princess Isabella," someone called out, and soon the entire room was chanting her name. The young princess blushed prettily and curtsied gracefully, just as Miss Adelaide had taught her. Sir Marcus positioned himself strategically near the royal family but maintained enough distance to scan the crowd continuously. His trained eyes moved methodically from face to face, looking for anything unusual or out of place. His hand rested casually on the hilt of his ceremonial sword, ready to draw it at a moment's notice if needed. The celebration began in earnest with the presentation of gifts. Isabella gasped with delight as she unwrapped treasure after treasure: a music box that played her favorite lullaby from the Duchess of Northport, a set of beautifully illustrated fairy tale books from the Ambassador of Aldoria, and a miniature pony from her father that made her squeal with joy. "Thank you all so much," Isabella said, her voice carrying across the hall. "This is the most wonderful birthday I could have ever dreamed of." Queen Vivian watched the proceedings with a carefully maintained smile, but Sir Marcus noticed something in her expression that made him uncomfortable. There was a calculating look in her eyes as she observed her stepdaughter receiving so much attention and adoration from the assembled nobles. The entertainment began with a troupe of acrobats who performed death-defying feats high above the crowd. Isabella watched in wide-eyed amazement as they flipped and soared through the air with incredible grace. Next came the promised magician, a mysterious figure in a flowing black cape who made doves appear from thin air and caused flowers to bloom instantly in his hands. "For the birthday princess," the magician said with a theatrical bow, producing a stunning white rose that sparkled as if dusted with diamonds. Isabella accepted the gift with wonder, inhaling its sweet fragrance. Sir Marcus studied the magician carefully, noting his movements and the way he interacted with the crowd. Everything seemed normal, but his sense of unease continued to grow. He caught the eye of Lieutenant Thomas Reed, his second-in-command, and gave him a subtle signal to increase their alertness. The afternoon progressed with games and dancing. Isabella participated in everything with infectious enthusiasm, her laughter ringing out above the music. She danced with young lords, played ring toss with the daughters of visiting dignitaries, and even convinced her father to join her in a silly game that had the entire court laughing. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow through the tall windows of the great hall, it was time for the main event, the ceremonial cutting of the birthday cake. The confection was a masterpiece, standing nearly 3 feet tall and decorated with sugar flowers and golden butterflies. 8 candles flickered on top, waiting for the birthday princess to make her wish. The crowd gathered around as Isabella stood before the magnificent cake, her eyes closed in concentration as she thought of her wish. Sir Marcus positioned himself directly behind the princess, his senses on high alert. Something about this moment felt significant, though he couldn't explain why. "I wish," Isabella began, then stopped and smiled mysteriously. "I can't tell you, or it won't come true." Everyone laughed and applauded as she leaned forward to blow out the candles. But just as she took a deep breath, Sir Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. Queen Vivian was standing slightly apart from the crowd, and she was making a barely perceptible gesture with her hand towards someone in the back of the room. Following her gaze, Sir Marcus spotted a figure near the servants' entrance who definitely didn't belong there. The man was dressed as a servant, but his posture and the way he moved marked him as someone with military training. More importantly, Sir Marcus could see the outline of a weapon concealed beneath his uniform. Time seemed to slow as Sir Marcus realized what was happening. This wasn't just a birthday celebration, it was a trap. Someone was planning to harm Princess Isabella, and Queen Vivian appeared to be involved. His mind raced as he calculated distances and options. The mysterious servant was moving closer to the princess, using the crowd's focus on the cake ceremony as cover. Without hesitation, Sir Marcus stepped closer to Isabella, his hand moving to his sword. He couldn't raise an alarm without causing panic, but he needed to be ready to act. The princess was still concentrating on her candles, completely unaware of the danger approaching. The servant continued to move through the crowd, and Sir Marcus could now see his face clearly. It was no one he recognized, which meant this was definitely not one of the palace staff. The man's eyes were fixed on Princess Isabella with an intensity that confirmed Sir Marcus's worst fears. Queen Vivian caught Sir Marcus's eye for just a moment, and he saw something there that chilled him to the bone. There was no surprise or concern in her expression, only a cold calculation that told him she knew exactly what was about to happen. "Make your wish quickly, darling," Queen Vivian said sweetly to Isabella, though there was an urgency in her voice that only Sir Marcus seemed to notice. Isabella nodded and took a deep breath, preparing to blow out her candles. The crowd pressed closer, everyone wanting to witness this magical moment. But Sir Marcus was no longer watching the princess. His attention was completely focused on the approaching threat and the woman who appeared to be orchestrating it. The mysterious servant was now just a few feet away from Isabella, his hand moving toward the concealed weapon. Sir Marcus knew he had only seconds to act. The princess leaned forward toward the candles, completely vulnerable and unaware of the danger. As Isabella began to blow out the first candle, Sir Marcus saw the servant's hand emerge from his jacket, revealing the glint of steel. There was no more time for subtlety or careful planning. The captain of the royal guard did what he had sworn to do. He prepared to give his life to protect the princess. The golden light from the remaining candles flickered across Isabella's innocent face as she continued blowing them out one by one, each small flame disappearing with a tiny puff of breath. The crowd counted along, 5, 4, 3. But Sir Marcus was no longer hearing their voices. All his attention was focused on the immediate threat to the life of the child he had sworn to protect. The servant's weapon was now fully visible, a curved dagger designed for close, silent work. Sir Marcus could see the determination in the man's eyes and knew there would be no hesitation in his attack. This was a professional assassin, and Princess Isabella was his target. As the last candle flickered out and the crowd erupted in applause, Sir Marcus made his move in the split second after the last candle went out and, before the applause could fully begin, Sir Marcus Blackwood moved with the precision and speed that had made him legendary among the knights of Valdoria. His years of training and countless battles had honed his reflexes to superhuman levels, and now every ounce of that skill was focused on one goal: saving Princess Isabella's life. The assassin's dagger caught the light from the chandeliers as it arced toward the princess's back. The blade was aimed perfectly to slip between her ribs and pierce her heart, a killing stroke that would have ended her life instantly. But Sir Marcus was already in motion, his powerful frame launching forward like a striking eagle. "Isabella," he shouted, his voice cutting through the applause like a sword through silk. Time seemed frozen as Sir Marcus threw himself between the princess and her would-be killer. The dagger that had been meant for Isabella's heart instead found its mark in Sir Marcus's shoulder, tearing through the fabric of his dress uniform and biting deep into his flesh. The pain was immediate and intense, but he ignored it completely, his only thought being to neutralize the threat. The crowd's applause turned to screams of terror as they realized what was happening. Ladies fainted, gentlemen shouted in alarm, and children began to cry as chaos erupted throughout the great hall. The carefully orchestrated birthday celebration had become a nightmare in the span of a heartbeat. "Assassin!" Lieutenant Reed shouted from across the room, drawing his sword and fighting his way through the panicking crowd toward his captain and the princess. Sir Marcus grappled with the assassin, his left arm useless due to the dagger wound but his right hand still strong enough to prevent another strike. The assassin was skilled and dangerous, his movements fluid and precise as he tried to push past the wounded guard captain to reach his intended target. Princess Isabella stood frozen in shock, her young mind unable to process the sudden transformation of her magical birthday into a scene of violence and terror. The beautiful white rose the magician had given her fell from her trembling fingers as she watched Sir Marcus fighting desperately to protect her. King Alexander reacted with the instincts of a warrior king, immediately moving to shield his daughter while drawing his own ceremonial sword. "Guards! Protect the princess," he commanded, his voice booming across the hall with royal authority. But it was Queen Vivian's reaction that Sir Marcus found most telling. While everyone else showed shock, fear, or determination to help, she remained eerily calm. Her blue eyes were cold and calculating as she watched the struggle, and Sir Marcus caught her making another subtle gesture toward the back of the room. His suspicions were confirmed when two more figures emerged from different points in the crowd, both moving with the same predatory grace as the first assassin. This wasn't a single attempt on Isabella's life, it was a coordinated attack involving multiple killers positioned throughout the celebration. "Father!" Isabella cried out as she saw the second assassin approaching from behind the king. Her small voice was barely audible above the chaos, but her warning gave King Alexander just enough time to turn and parry a vicious thrust aimed at his spine. Sir Marcus managed to drive his knee into his opponent's stomach, creating enough space to draw his own sword despite his wounded shoulder. The assassin stumbled backward but quickly recovered, his dagger weaving deadly patterns in the air between them. Blood was flowing freely from Sir Marcus's wound, weakening him with each passing second, but his determination never wavered. The third assassin was moving toward Isabella from her left side, using the panicking crowd as cover. He was the most dangerous of the three, younger and faster than the others, with the cold efficiency of a killer who had never failed in his missions. His target was clear: eliminate the princess while the other two assassins kept her protectors occupied. Lieutenant Reed had finally fought his way through the crowd and engaged the second assassin who was attacking King Alexander. Steel rang against steel as the two warriors exchanged lightning-fast strikes, their swords creating sparks with each impact. Reed was an excellent swordsman, but the assassin was fighting with the desperation of a man who knew failure meant death. "Isabella, get behind me!" Sir Marcus called out to the princess, even as he continued his deadly dance with the first assassin. The man was relentless, his dagger seeking any opening in Sir Marcus's defense. The guard captain's shoulder wound was making his sword work clumsy, and he knew he couldn't maintain this pace much longer. The princess tried to move toward Sir Marcus, but the third assassin was already too close. She found herself trapped between the ongoing sword fight and the approaching killer, with nowhere safe to run. Her 8th birthday tiara caught the light as she turned her head frantically, looking for escape. Queen Vivian finally seemed to spring into action, moving toward Isabella with apparent concern. "Isabella, darling, come to me. You'll be safe with your stepmother." But Sir Marcus saw through her deception. Even while fighting for his life, he noticed that Queen Vivian was positioning herself to guide Isabella directly into the path of the third assassin rather than away from danger. The realization sent a surge of rage through him that temporarily overcame his pain and weakness. "Stay away from her!" Sir Marcus roared at Queen Vivian, his voice filled with such fury and authority that even the assassin he was fighting seemed momentarily startled. Using this brief distraction, Sir Marcus executed a perfect riposte that sent his opponent's dagger flying across the room. But before he could press his advantage, the wounded assassin drew a second weapon, a curved sword that gleamed with an oily sheen that suggested poison on its blade. The battle was far from over, and Sir Marcus was growing weaker by the moment. Blood continued to flow from his shoulder wound, and his vision was beginning to blur slightly at the edges. But his training and his loyalty to Princess Isabella kept him fighting with unwavering determination. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Reed had managed to wound the second assassin, but the man continued fighting with fanatical determination. It was clear that these were no ordinary killers; they had been trained and motivated to complete their mission regardless of the cost to themselves. Princess Isabella, caught in the middle of this deadly chaos, did something that surprised everyone. Instead of cowering in fear, she began to remember the self-defense lessons that Sir Marcus had insisted on giving her despite Queen Vivian's objections. The young princess might only be 8 years old, but she was also the daughter of a warrior king and had inherited both courage and intelligence. When the third assassin finally made his move toward her, Isabella didn't freeze or run blindly. Instead, she ducked low and rolled toward one of the overturned chairs, putting a barrier between herself and her attacker. It was a small action, but it bought precious seconds and showed that she wouldn't be an easy victim. "Well done, Your Highness!" Sir Marcus called out proudly, even as he parried another poison blade aimed at his heart. The princess's quick thinking had given him hope that she might survive this ordeal after all. The third assassin, frustrated by his quarry's unexpected evasiveness, began to move more aggressively. He leaped over the chair that Isabella was hiding behind, his weapon raised for a killing strike. But, as he landed, he found himself face to face with an unexpected obstacle. Several of the noble guests, led by the Duke of Westmarch, had overcome their initial shock and were now fighting back against the attackers. The Duke, a veteran of several wars despite his advancing age, had armed himself with a poker from the great fireplace and was wielding it like a sword. "You dare attack a child at her birthday celebration," the Duke shouted, his weathered face flushed with righteous anger. "Have you no honor at all? The third assassin found himself surrounded by angry nobles who might not have been professional fighters, but who were determined to protect the princess. They attacked him with whatever weapons they could find: fireplace tools, decorative swords from the wall displays, even heavy candlesticks that could crush a skull if swung with enough force. This development changed the entire dynamic of the battle. What had been a carefully planned assassination attempt was now turning into a chaotic melee with unpredictable outcomes. The assassins had expected to face only a few professional guards, not an entire room full of determined defenders. Sir Marcus pressed his advantage against the first assassin, using the man's surprise at this turn of events to land a solid blow with his sword pommel. The assassin staggered, blood flowing from a cut above his eye, and Sir Marcus followed up with a thrust that would have ended the fight if his wounded shoulder hadn't betrayed him at the crucial moment. The poisoned blade whispered past Sir Marcus's ear as he stumbled slightly, close enough that he could smell the acrid scent of the toxin that coated it. One scratch from that weapon would mean certain death within minutes, and both fighters knew it. Lieutenant Reed was beginning to gain the upper hand against the second assassin, his superior skill and training beginning to tell despite his opponent's fanatical determination. But the fight was taking its toll on him as well, and he could see that his captain was in serious trouble. Queen Vivian continued to maintain her facade of concern while actually maneuvering to ensure that the assassination attempt would succeed. She called out directions to Isabella that would have led the princess directly into danger, all while appearing to offer maternal protection and guidance. "Isabella, darling, this way. Come to me immediately." Queen Vivian's voice carried across the chaos with apparent urgency and love. But Sir Marcus had seen through her deception completely now. Even while fighting desperately against a poisoned blade, he managed to shout a warning: "Princess! Do not trust the queen. She is part of this." His words sent a shock through everyone who could hear them above the sounds of battle. The accusation that Queen Vivian was involved in the assassination attempt was so serious and unexpected that even some of the fighting paused momentarily as people tried to process what they had heard. King Alexander, still engaged in his own battle with Lieutenant Reed's help, turned toward his wife with a look of stunned disbelief. "Vivian? What is he saying? What is the meaning of this?" Queen Vivian's carefully maintained mask finally began to slip. The cold calculation that Sir Marcus had noticed earlier became more obvious as she realized that her deception had been discovered. Her blue eyes hardened like ice as she looked at the wounded guard captain with pure hatred. "He's delusional from blood loss," she said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had held before. "I'm trying to protect Isabella, just as any mother would." But Princess Isabella, wise beyond her 8 years, had been watching and listening carefully. She had always felt uncomfortable around her stepmother, sensing something false in the woman's displays of affection. Now, seeing Queen Vivian's true nature revealed under pressure, the princess understood that Sir Marcus was telling the truth. "Stay away from me!" Isabella called out to Queen Vivian, her young voice carrying a surprising note of command that reminded everyone that she was indeed a princess of royal blood. The third assassin, momentarily freed from the nobles who had been attacking him, made one final desperate lunge toward Princess Isabella. But he had underestimated both her resourcefulness and the loyalty of those sworn to protect her. Sir Marcus, seeing the assassin's attack despite his own precarious situation, made a choice that would define him as a hero for the rest of his life. Ignoring his wounds, his exhaustion, and the poisoned blade still threatening his life, he threw himself across the room with the last of his strength. The dagger that was meant for Princess Isabella's heart instead found Sir Marcus Blackwood's back. The sound that Sir Marcus Blackwood made as the assassin's dagger pierced his back was not one of pain, but of grim satisfaction. He had succeeded in his primary mission. Princess Isabella was safe, at least for this moment. The blade had been meant for her innocent heart, but instead it had found the broad back of her protector, a man who had never hesitated to place duty above his own survival. As Sir Marcus fell to his knees, his blood spreading across the marble floor of the great hall, he kept his eyes fixed on Princess Isabella. Even with 2 serious wounds now weakening him rapidly, his only concern was ensuring that she remained out of harm's way. The princess stared at him in shock, her young mind struggling to comprehend that this brave man was willing to die for her. "Sir Marcus!" Isabella cried out, her voice breaking with emotion. She started to run toward her fallen protector, but he raised a trembling hand to stop her. "Stay back, Your Highness," he managed to say, though speaking was becoming increasingly difficult. "The danger is not over yet." Indeed, while the third assassin had successfully struck Sir Marcus, he had not expected the guard captain's sacrifice to energize the other defenders in the room. The Duke of Westmarch let out a roar of rage and brought his makeshift weapon down on the assassin's head with crushing force. Other nobles joined in, their earlier shock replaced by fury at seeing such a noble act of sacrifice. Lieutenant Thomas Reed had finally managed to defeat the second assassin, his sword finding its mark in a decisive thrust that ended that particular threat. But, as he turned to assess the overall situation, he could see that his beloved captain was gravely wounded and that the battle was far from over. The first assassin, the one who had been fighting Sir Marcus before the guard captain's heroic intervention, was still very much alive and dangerous. The poisoned blade in his hand gleamed menacingly as he assessed his new tactical situation. His two companions were either dead or dying, but he was a professional killer who had never failed to complete a mission. Princess Isabella was still alive, which meant his work was not yet finished. King Alexander had been fighting with the skill and determination of his younger days, but the years of comfortable palace life had taken their toll on his conditioning. He was breathing heavily and his sword arm was beginning to tire. When he saw Sir Marcus fall, the shock of seeing his most trusted guard wounded so severely nearly cost him his own life as his attention wavered for a crucial moment. "Alexander!" Queen Vivian called out in apparent concern, though her true motives remained suspect. "You must get Isabella to safety. Let the guards handle these assassins." But her words rang false to those who had heard Sir Marcus's accusations. The way she positioned herself in the room, the timing of her suggestions, and the cold calculation in her eyes when she thought no one was watching all pointed to her involvement in the assassination plot. Princess Isabella, despite her youth, was beginning to understand the full scope of what was happening. Her stepmother, the woman who had married her father and promised to love and protect her, was actually trying to have her killed. The realization was almost more painful than watching Sir Marcus bleeding on the floor. "Why?" Isabella asked Queen Vivian directly, her 8-year-old voice carrying a note of heartbreak that silenced even the chaos around them. "Why do you want to hurt me? I tried to love you like a real mother." Queen Vivian's mask finally dropped completely. The false warmth and maternal affection she had maintained for 3 years disappeared, replaced by cold ambition and ruthless calculation. When she spoke, her voice was devoid of any pretense of love or care. "Because, my dear stepdaughter, as long as you live, you stand in the way of my own children inheriting this throne. Your father is still young enough to have more heirs, but if you were to die tragically, any sons I bear would be next in line. It's nothing personal, Isabella. It's simply politics." The admission sent shockwaves through everyone who heard it. King Alexander's face went white with a combination of rage and heartbreak as he realized that the woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with his daughter's welfare, had been planning murder from the very beginning. "You monster," the king whispered, his voice filled with such pain and fury that even the remaining assassins seemed momentarily affected by it. "I loved you. I trusted you with my child's life." Queen Vivian shrugged with casual indifference. "Love is a luxury that royalty cannot afford, Alexander. You should have learned that lesson when you married your first wife for a political alliance. At least I'm being honest about my motivations now." Sir Marcus, despite his weakening condition, had been listening to every word of this exchange. With tremendous effort, he began to pull himself across the floor toward his sword, which had fallen several feet away when he had thrown himself in front of the assassin's blade. Blood marked his path across the marble, but his determination never wavered. The surviving assassin saw Sir Marcus's movement and realized that the wounded guard captain might still pose a threat. He began moving toward the fallen knight, his poisoned blade ready to deliver a finishing blow that would end Sir Marcus's suffering permanently. But Lieutenant Reed had been watching as well, and he was not about to let his captain and mentor die while he still drew breath. With a battle cry that echoed through the great hall, he charged across the room, his sword cutting through the air in a silver arc that forced the assassin to abandon his attack on Sir Marcus and defend himself instead. The duel that followed was a masterpiece of swordsmanship. Lieutenant Reed fought with all the skill that Sir Marcus had taught him over the years, each movement precise and deadly. The assassin was equally skilled, his blade work flowing like water as he sought openings in Reed's defense while simultaneously trying to land a fatal cut with his poison weapon. Princess Isabella watched in fascination and terror as the two warriors danced their deadly dance. She had seen sword practice many times in the palace courtyard, but this was different. This was a fight to the death, with no rules or courtesy, just pure skill and determination. Sir Marcus finally managed to reach his sword, though the effort had cost him dearly. His vision was blurring from blood loss, and he could feel his strength ebbing away like water from a broken dam. But, as he wrapped his fingers around the familiar grip of his weapon, he felt a surge of renewed purpose. "Isabella," he called out softly, his voice barely carrying across the room. The princess immediately ran to his side, kneeling beside him despite the danger that still surrounded them. "Sir Marcus, please don't die," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I need you. You're the only one who has always protected me." He reached up with his free hand and gently touched her face, leaving a small smudge of blood on her cheek. "Listen to me very carefully, Your Highness. I may not survive this day, but you must. You are the future of this kingdom, and there are people who will always try to harm you because of who you are. But how can I protect myself? I'm just a little girl." "You are a princess of Valdoria," Sir Marcus replied firmly. "That means you have strength inside you that you haven't even discovered yet. Remember what I've taught you about courage, about thinking clearly under pressure, about never giving up even when everything seems hopeless." Their conversation was interrupted by a cry of pain from Lieutenant Reed. The assassin's poisoned blade had found its mark, cutting across Reed's sword arm and leaving a shallow but dangerous wound. The poison would begin working immediately, and Reed had only minutes before it would affect his fighting ability. Knowing that his time was running out, Reed pressed his attack with renewed fury. His sword became a blur of motion as he drove the assassin back toward one of the great pillars that supported the hall's vaulted ceiling. The assassin was skilled, but he had not expected to face such determined resistance from multiple opponents. King Alexander, having finally processed the full scope of his wife's betrayal, turned toward Queen Vivian with his sword raised. His face was a mask of grief and rage as he contemplated what he had to do. She had not only tried to murder his daughter, but had also manipulated and deceived him for years while planning this atrocity. "Guards," the king commanded. "Arrest Queen Vivian for high treason and conspiracy to commit murder." But Queen Vivian had one final card to play. From somewhere within her elegant gown, she produced a small crossbow, the kind favored by assassins for its concealability and effectiveness at close range. The bolt was undoubtedly poisoned, and, at this range, it would be almost impossible to miss. "I don't think so, Alexander," she said, her voice now openly malicious. "If I cannot have this thrown through my children, then perhaps I can claim it as your widow. Isabella will still die, and you will join her in death for refusing to see reason." She raised the crossbow toward King Alexander, but her attention was momentarily diverted by the ongoing sword fight between Lieutenant Reed and the last assassin. In that instant of distraction, Sir Marcus summoned every last ounce of his fading strength. Despite his wounds, despite his weakness, despite the fact that standing up seemed impossible, Sir Marcus Blackwood rose to his feet one final time. His sword, slick with his own blood, caught the light from the chandeliers as he lifted it with both hands. His target was not the assassin fighting Lieutenant Reed, nor even Queen Vivian with her crossbow. His target was the massive chain that held the largest chandelier directly above the central part of the Great Hall. "For Princess Isabella!" Sir Marcus roared with the last of his voice, bringing his sword down on the chain with all his remaining strength. The ancient links, weakened by centuries of bearing the chandelier's weight, parted with a sound like thunder. The massive fixture, laden with hundreds of crystal teardrops and burning candles, began its fatal descent toward the floor below. Queen Vivian looked up just in time to see death falling toward her from above. Her scream was cut short as tons of crystal, metal, and flame crashed down exactly where she had been standing. The crossbow bolt she had been about to fire went wide, embedding itself harmlessly in the wall. The assassin, seeing his employer crushed beneath the fallen chandelier and Lieutenant Reed still pressing his attack despite his poison wound, finally realized that his mission had failed completely. With the pragmatic assessment of a professional killer, he decided that retreat was his only option for survival. But he had underestimated the determination of everyone in the room to see justice done. The Duke of Westmarch and several other nobles blocked his path to the exits, while Lieutenant Reed continued to pursue him despite the poison working through his system. Sir Marcus, having expended the last of his strength in bringing down the chandelier, collapsed to his knees beside Princess Isabella. His breathing was labored, and his skin had taken on a pale, waxy appearance that suggested his life was measured in minutes rather than hours. Did we succeed?" he whispered to the princess. Isabella took his hand in both of hers, not caring about the blood that stained her birthday dress. "Yes, Sir Marcus. You saved me. You saved everyone." He smiled weakly. "Good. That is all I ever wanted to do." As Sir Marcus's consciousness began to fade, he could hear the sounds of the final assassin being captured alive by Lieutenant Reed and the noble volunteers. Justice would be served, and, more importantly, Princess Isabella would live to see her 9th birthday. But the cost had been almost too high to bear. The royal physician, Dr. Edmund Hartwell, had seen many battles and their aftermath during his 30 years of service to the crown, but nothing had prepared him for the scene that greeted him when he rushed into the Great Hall. The magnificent birthday celebration had been transformed into something resembling a battlefield, with blood staining the marble floors and the massive chandelier lying in ruins where Queen Vivian had met her end. "Quickly! Help me move Sir Marcus to my chambers," Dr. Hartwell commanded, his voice cutting through the shocked silence that had fallen over the survivors. Lieutenant Thomas Reed, despite the poison coursing through his own veins, helped carry his unconscious captain from the hall, leaving a trail of crimson drops on the pristine floors. Princess Isabella followed closely behind, her birthday tiara askew and her white dress stained with Sir Marcus's blood. She refused to leave his side despite the gentle urgings of her governess, Miss Adelaide, who had emerged from her hiding place once the danger had passed. "Will he live?" Isabella asked Dr. Hartwell as they laid Sir Marcus on the physician's examination table. Her 8-year-old voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she watched the man who had saved her life fighting for his own. Dr. Hartwell examined the wounds carefully, his experienced hands probing gently around the dagger wounds in Sir Marcus's shoulder and back. The shoulder wound, while painful and debilitating, had missed any vital organs or major blood vessels. The back wound was more concerning. The blade had penetrated deeply and was dangerously close to his lung. "The wounds are serious, Your Highness, but Sir Marcus is a strong man," the physician said as he began cleaning and treating the injuries. "The blade missed his heart by mere inches, and, while he's lost a great deal of blood, I believe he will recover with proper care and rest." Lieutenant Reed swayed slightly on his feet, the poison from the assassin's blade beginning to affect his coordination. Dr. Hartwell immediately noticed his condition and quickly prepared an antidote, having dealt with similar toxins during his years of treating wounded soldiers. "Drink this immediately," he ordered, pressing a bitter-smelling potion into Reed's hands. "The poison is designed to incapacitate rather than kill quickly, so we have time to counteract its effects." As Dr. Hartwell worked to save both men, King Alexander stood in the corner of the room, his face a mask of grief, rage, and self-recrimination. The realization that he had been married to his daughter's would-be murderer for 3 years was almost too much to bear. How many times had Vivian been alone with Isabella? How many opportunities had she had to harm his daughter before today? "Father," Isabella said softly, approaching the king with the intuitive understanding that children often possess. "It's not your fault. You couldn't have known what she was planning." King Alexander knelt down to his daughter's level, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "I should have seen it, Isabella. I should have protected you better. If Sir Marcus hadn't been there today." "But he was there," Isabella replied firmly. "And so were Lieutenant Reed and all the brave people who fought to protect me. Evil people will always exist, Father, but so will good people who are willing to fight against them." Her mature response surprised everyone in the room and reminded them all that despite her youth, Princess Isabella possessed wisdom beyond her years. The events of this day had forced her to grow up quickly, but they had also revealed the strength of character that would serve her well as a future ruler. Dr. Hartwell finished stitching Sir Marcus's wounds and administering medications to prevent infection and manage his pain. The knight's breathing had stabilized, and his color was slowly returning to normal as the physician's treatments took effect. He will need several weeks of complete rest, Dr. Hartwell explained to the king. The wounds will heal, but his body needs time to recover from the blood loss and trauma. Under no circumstances should he attempt to resume his duties until I declare him fit for service. Princess Isabella pulled a chair close to Sir Marcus's bedside and settled herself into it with obvious determination. Then, I'll stay here with him until he's better. He protected me, so now I'll help protect him while he recovers. Miss Adelaide started to protest that such behavior was inappropriate for a princess, but King Alexander held up a hand to silence her. Let her stay, Adelaide. After what happened today, I think we can bend protocol a little. Over the following days, Princess Isabella proved to be a devoted and surprisingly effective nurse. She read to Sir Marcus from her favorite books, brought him flowers from the palace gardens, and even convinced the kitchen staff to prepare his favorite foods once he was able to eat solid meals again. Sir Marcus, when he was conscious and alert enough to appreciate her presence, was both touched and amused by the princess's determined care. You know, Your Highness, he said weakly during one of their conversations, I think you missed your calling. You would make an excellent physician. I learned from watching Dr. Hartwell, Isabella replied seriously. But I think I prefer being a princess. That way I can make laws to protect people instead of just healing them after they get hurt. Her response revealed the profound impact that the assassination attempt had made on her young mind. She was already thinking about how she could use her future power to prevent such tragedies from befalling others. Lieutenant Reed recovered more quickly from his poison wound, and within a week he was back on his feet, though still weak. He immediately threw himself into investigating the assassination plot, determined to uncover every detail of the conspiracy that had nearly cost Princess Isabella her life. The surviving assassin, captured alive during the battle, initially refused to reveal anything about who had hired him or how the plot had been organized. But, faced with the certainty of execution for attempting to murder a member of the royal family, he eventually decided that cooperation might earn him a slightly less painful death. Queen Vivian approached me 3 months ago, the assassin finally confessed during his interrogation. She claimed that Princess Isabella was illegitimate and that her removal would be a service to the kingdom. She paid us very well and promised even more gold once the job was completed. Lieutenant Reed pressed for more details. How many others were involved? Was this part of a larger conspiracy against the royal family? Just the 3 of us that you saw, the assassin replied. The Queen was very specific that this should appear to be a random attack by foreign agents, not an internal plot. She wanted to be able to comfort the king in his grief and position herself as the grieving stepmother. The investigation revealed the full scope of Queen Vivian's deception. She had been systematically poisoning King Alexander with small doses of a substance that would have eventually killed him, making his death appear natural while leaving her free to rule as regent until any children she might bear came of age. Hidden in her private chambers, investigators found detailed plans for eliminating not just Princess Isabella, but also several key nobles who might have opposed her rule. She had been building a network of supporters among the more corrupt and ambitious members of the court while identifying those who would need to be removed. She was very thorough, Lieutenant Reed reported to King Alexander. If her plan had succeeded today, she would have been able to consolidate power very quickly. Many people would have died before anyone realized what was happening. King Alexander struggled with the knowledge that he had been so completely deceived by someone he had loved and trusted. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of the attempt on Isabella's life, but because it made him question his own judgment as both a man and a king. Dr. Hartwell, observing the king's emotional state, prescribed a treatment that was both practical and wise. Your Majesty needs to focus on positive activities that will help heal both his heart and his confidence. I recommend spending more time with Princess Isabella and Sir Marcus as they recover. Seeing their resilience and courage will remind you of the good that still exists in your kingdom. The physician's advice proved to be excellent. As the days passed and Sir Marcus grew stronger, the 3 of them, king, princess, and knight, developed a closer bond than they had ever shared before. They talked about everything that had happened, processing the trauma together and finding comfort in their mutual survival. Princess Isabella, in particular, seemed to thrive despite the ordeal she had endured. Rather than becoming fearful or withdrawn, she appeared more confident and determined than ever. She asked detailed questions about palace security, requested additional lessons in self-defense, and even began learning about the political intricacies of running a kingdom. "I want to understand how someone like Queen Vivian was able to get so close to hurting people," she explained to her father. "If I'm going to be queen someday, I need to know how to protect my subjects from people who would harm them." Sir Marcus, despite his weakened condition, began giving Isabella advanced lessons in recognizing deception and evaluating people's true motivations. These sessions became some of the most valuable education she would ever receive, taught by a man who had literally given his blood to keep her safe. "Remember, Your Highness," he told her during one such lesson, "evil people are often very good at appearing innocent and trustworthy. They use our desire to see the best in others as a weapon against us. But, if you learn to watch what people do rather than just listening to what they say, you'll be much harder to deceive." Lieutenant Reed, having been promoted to captain of the Royal Guard in recognition of his heroism during the attack, worked tirelessly to rebuild the security protocols that had been compromised by Queen Vivian's inside knowledge. He instituted new procedures for vetting palace staff, established multiple layers of protection around the royal family, and created a network of loyal agents who could detect threats before they materialized. As Sir Marcus's strength returned, so did his sense of purpose. The assassination attempt had reminded him why his oath of protection was so important, and he found renewed dedication in his service to the royal family. But, perhaps more importantly, his relationship with Princess Isabella had evolved from that of protector and charge to something more like that of a beloved uncle and his favorite niece. "You know," Sir Marcus said to Isabella during one of their conversations as he recovered, "I think this experience has made you stronger, not weaker. Many adults would have been broken by what you endured, but you've used it to become wiser and more determined." Princess Isabella smiled, looking older than her 8 years. "You taught me that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared. I was terrified during the attack, but I knew you and Father and Lieutenant Reed would protect me. That made me brave enough to help protect myself too." As the weeks passed and Sir Marcus approached full recovery, the kingdom began to heal from the trauma of the assassination attempt. The story of the brave knight who had saved his princess became legend, told in taverns and marketplaces throughout Valdoria. But, more importantly, it became a reminder that good people were willing to sacrifice everything to protect innocence and justice. The bond forged in blood and courage between Princess Isabella and Sir Marcus would endure for the rest of their lives, a testament to the power of loyalty, sacrifice, and the unbreakable connection between a protector and those he has sworn to defend. 10 years had passed since the assassination attempt that had nearly claimed Princess Isabella's life on her 8th birthday. Now 18 and preparing for her coronation as Queen of Valdoria, she stood in the same great hall where Sir Marcus Blackwood had saved her life, though the room had been completely renovated since that terrible day. The marble floors had been replaced with new stone, and magnificent tapestries now covered the walls where bloodstains had once marked the scene of battle. A new chandelier, even more beautiful than the one Sir Marcus had brought down to stop Queen Vivian, cast warm light throughout the hall. But, despite all the changes, Isabella could still remember every detail of that day with crystal clarity. Sir Marcus, now bearing the distinguished title of Lord Protector of the Realm, stood at her side as he had for the past decade. The scars from his wounds had faded to thin white lines, but they served as permanent reminders of his sacrifice. His hair had gained streaks of silver at the temples, and his face bore the weathered lines of a man who had seen much of both good and evil in his lifetime. "Are you ready for this, Your Highness?" Sir Marcus asked quietly as they prepared for the coronation ceremony. Despite the years that had passed, he still addressed her formally in public, though in private moments she had become like the daughter he had never had. "I think so," Isabella replied, adjusting the crown that had once belonged to her mother. "Though I have to admit, I'm more nervous about ruling a kingdom than I was about facing those assassins 10 years ago." Sir Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious features. "That's because you understand the responsibility now. Fear is wisdom when it comes to wielding power over others."
Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become. The coronation ceremony proceeded with all the pageantry and tradition that such occasions demanded.
Representatives from kingdoms throughout Europe had come to witness Princess Isabella's ascension to the throne, and the great hall was filled with dignitaries, nobles, and common citizens who had been selected by lottery for the honor of attending. King Alexander, who had chosen to abdicate in favor of his daughter rather than wait for death to pass the crown, performed the ceremony with obvious pride and emotion. The years since Queen Vivian's betrayal had been kind to him. He had found love again with a gentle widow named Lady Catherine, and their marriage had produced 2 sons who adored their older sister. As the crown was placed upon Isabella's head and she spoke the ancient oath of coronation, Sir Marcus felt a profound sense of completion. The frightened little girl he had protected was now a confident young woman ready to lead her people with wisdom and compassion. His life's work had reached its ultimate fulfillment. I, Isabella Eleanor Catherine, swear by Almighty God to govern the people of Valdoria according to their respective laws and customs, to cause law and justice and mercy to be executed in all my judgments, and to maintain the peace and prosperity of this realm for all my subjects, high and low alike. The crowd erupted in cheers as the ceremony concluded, but Isabella's first act as queen was characteristically thoughtful and meaningful. She turned to Sir Marcus and spoke in a voice that carried clearly throughout the hall. Sir Marcus Blackwood, Lord Protector of the realm, will you continue to serve your queen as faithfully as you served the princess? Sir Marcus knelt before her, his voice thick with emotion as he renewed his oath of service. Your Majesty, I pledge my sword, my life, and my honor to your service for as long as I draw breath. But Isabella had a surprise for the man who had given so much to protect her. Rise, Sir Marcus. I have something to give you in return. She gestured to Captain Thomas Reed, who approached carrying an ornate scroll sealed with the royal seal. Sir Marcus looked puzzled as Isabella began to read from the document. For extraordinary service to the crown, for valor beyond the call of duty, and for the salvation of our realm through selfless sacrifice, I hereby grant to Sir Marcus Blackwood the Duchy of Ironhold, with all the lands, titles, and privileges thereto pertaining. Furthermore, he shall serve as my principal advisor and shall have a voice in all matters of state for as long as he desires. The crowd gasped at this unprecedented honor. Making a knight into a duke was almost unheard of, and granting him such authority in the government was a clear indication of the new queen's trust and gratitude. Sir Marcus stood in stunned silence for a moment before finding his voice. Your Majesty, this is... I cannot possibly accept such honors. I was only doing my duty. Isabella smiled, and, for a moment she looked like the 8-year-old girl she had once been. Sir Marcus, you gave me my life. The least I can do is give you a duchy. Besides, I'm going to need your wisdom in the years to come. The world is changing, and Valdoria needs leaders who understand both honor and pragmatism. The celebration that followed the coronation was deliberately held in the palace gardens rather than the Great Hall, a decision that reflected Queen Isabella's sensitivity to the traumatic memories associated with that space. But, as the evening progressed and the festivities continued, she found herself drawn back to the scene of her near-death experience. Sir Marcus found her there, standing alone in the renovated hall, lost in thought. The new chandelier cast dancing shadows on the walls as she remembered that terrible and wonderful day that had shaped so much of her life. Second thoughts about the crown, he asked gently, moving to stand beside her. Not at all, Isabella replied. I was just thinking about how much that day changed everything. Not just for me, but for the entire kingdom. If Queen Vivian had succeeded, if you hadn't been there to save me, how different would everything be now? Sir Marcus considered her question seriously. Very different, I imagine. But dwelling on what might have been is less important than focusing on what is and what will be. You are queen now, Isabella, and you have the power to shape the future in ways that honor the sacrifices that brought you to this moment. Over the following months, Queen Isabella proved to be everything her supporters had hoped and, more than her critics had feared. She implemented reforms that strengthened the kingdom's defenses against internal threats while also improving the lives of common citizens. Her experiences had taught her that evil could come from unexpected sources, but they had also shown her the power of good people working together. One of her first major initiatives was the establishment of the Royal Guard Academy, where young men and women could train to protect not just the royal family, but all citizens of Valdoria from those who would do them harm. Sir Marcus, now Duke of Ironhold, served as the Academy's first director and helped design a curriculum that emphasized not just martial skills, but also ethical reasoning and the psychology of recognizing threats. "We cannot prevent all evil," he told the first class of cadets, "but we can prepare good people to stand against it when it reveals itself. The price of freedom and safety is eternal vigilance, and that vigilance must be exercised by people of honor and courage." Queen Isabella also established new protocols for royal marriages, requiring extensive background investigations and multiple character references for anyone seeking to marry into the royal family. The memory of Queen Vivian's deception remained fresh enough to serve as a cautionary tale for future generations. But perhaps her most significant achievement was the way she transformed the culture of the royal court. Gone were the days of backbiting, intrigue, and hidden agendas that had allowed someone like Vivian to operate undetected. In their place, Isabella fostered an atmosphere of openness, honesty, and mutual accountability that made conspiracies much more difficult to organize and maintain. Captain Reed, who had been promoted to general and placed in charge of all royal security, often remarked that protecting Queen Isabella was both easier and more rewarding than it had been to protect the young princess. "She understands the threats she faces," he explained to his subordinates, "and she actively participates in her own protection rather than simply relying on others to keep her safe."
As years passed, the story of the assassination attempt became part of Valdoria's national mythology.
Children learned about Sir Marcus's sacrifice in their history lessons, and his example inspired a new generation of young people to consider careers in public service and protection of others. The date of Isabella's 8th birthday became a national holiday dedicated to honoring those who risked their lives to protect the innocent. Sir Marcus, now Duke Marcus, aged gracefully into the role of elder statesman and trusted advisor. His relationship with Queen Isabella evolved from protector and protected to something resembling that of a father and daughter, though they both understood that their bond transcended such simple categories. They had shared an experience that few people could understand, the moment when life and death hung in the balance and courage made all the difference. On the 10th anniversary of the assassination attempt, Queen Isabella held a private ceremony in the Great Hall to honor all those who had fought to save her life. A memorial plaque was installed on the wall listing the names of everyone who had participated in her defense, from Duke Marcus and General Reed to the nobles who had armed themselves with fireplace tools to fight trained killers. "These people," she said during her speech at the ceremony, "represent the best of what it means to be human. When confronted with evil, they did not hesitate, they did not calculate personal advantage, and they did not consider their own safety. They simply acted according to their principles and their love for what is right and good." As Queen Isabella spoke these words, Duke Marcus reflected on the strange turns that life could take. A decade earlier, he had been a simple knight doing his duty to protect a child. Now he was a peer of the realm, advisor to a queen, and founder of an institution that would train protectors for generations to come. But, most importantly, he had lived to see that frightened little girl become a wise and compassionate ruler who would make the world better for her having lived in it. The bond between them, forged in blood and sacrifice, had become something that would outlast their individual lives. Queen Isabella's reign would be remembered for many achievements, but historians would always note that it began with a lesson in courage taught by a knight who was willing to die rather than fail in his duty to protect innocence. Years later, when Duke Marcus finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Queen Isabella personally carried his sword in the funeral procession and delivered a eulogy that moved the entire kingdom to tears. She spoke of his sacrifice, his wisdom, and his unwavering dedication to the principles that made civilization possible. "Sir Marcus Blackwood saved more than just my life on that terrible day," she concluded. "He saved the future of our kingdom and proved that one person's courage can change the course of history. His legacy lives on in every person who chooses to stand against evil, in every act of selfless protection, and in every moment when good triumphs over the forces that would destroy what we hold dear." The story of Princess Isabella and Sir Marcus became legend, passed down through generations as a reminder that heroes are not born but made through the choices they make in moments of crisis. And, in the kingdom of Valdoria, children still learn that sometimes the greatest victories are won not through conquest or cleverness, but through the simple willingness of good people to sacrifice everything for those they are sworn to protect. The Great Hall still stands today, its new chandelier casting light on gatherings of dignitaries and celebrations of state. But those who know its history can still sense the echoes of that long-ago birthday when a knight proved that honor and courage are more than just words, and a frightened little girl learned that she possessed the strength to overcome any challenge life might present. In the end, that may be the most important lesson of all, that evil, no matter how clever or well-planned, cannot prevail against people who are willing to stand together in defense of what is right. The assassination attempt that was meant to destroy a princess instead created a queen whose reign would be remembered as a golden age of justice, prosperity, and peace. And, in the royal archives of Valdoria, carefully preserved for future generations, lies Sir Marcus's final report on the events of that day. His last words in the document serve as both a summation of his service and a challenge to all who would follow in his footsteps. The highest honor a knight can achieve is not glory in battle or rewards from his sovereign, but the knowledge that when evil threatened innocence, he stood firm and did not fail. May all who serve remember that our duty is not to ourselves, but to those who depend on our strength, our courage, and our willingness to sacrifice everything in defense of what is right and good.
The legacy lives on.